Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where today I'm going to be doing an old classic kind of thing here on YouTube. I'm going to be doing what is called an unboxing video. For some reason, unboxing videos are really popular on YouTube, and they're popular with all age groups. Kids love them, young people love them, ordinary people love them, old people love them. There's something which is fascinating about opening a box to see what's inside. People are naturally curious about such things, and so I thought, I'll go ahead and try one of these things and see how well it goes over. And I thought this would be interesting because what's in this box is something quite unusual. Now, you're probably looking at the box here, and what it says on the outside is Canon P Populaire 35mm Canon camera. There's nothing especially rare about the Canon P camera. It was quite a popular camera back in the day, and they were sold all around the world. But this one is different. This is not your typical Canon P Populaire 35mm Canon camera. If you move the box this way, and we have a little more writing on this side, and it says pretty much the same thing. Canon P Populaire 35mm Canon camera, body only, in ever-ready leather case, and so on. What makes this camera very special is this sticker right here, which simply says black. And what that means is that this is one of the handful of black paint Canon P cameras which were made back around 1959, 1960 or so. These are rare enough that in 15 years of dealing in cameras and living in probably the camera capital of the world, I've only seen 2 examples, and this is one of them. The other one I had earlier in the year. I bought it last winter, and I had planned to keep that camera because I thought I would never see one again. But then someone made me an offer for it which I couldn't refuse and didn't involve losing my life. So I let it go, and I was really disappointed, and for the last month I've been kind of kicking myself for letting it go. And then this one came up. And when it came up, I'll admit that it wasn't cheap. I just had to have it. So here it is. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what we will find inside this old 60-year-old box. So go ahead and open it in this position. And interesting thing here, 495 camera spelled with K and 324 optic. So obviously this camera, this is German, so this camera was exported to Germany. It's really odd that you manufacture a camera in Japan, then you sell it to Germany, and then somehow it finds its way back to Japan. Especially since Germany has its own, I guess, fine camera maker of rangefinder cameras. I won't mention them until later. So I go ahead and pop open the door like this, and I reach inside, and if I pull it out here, here you see it. This is an original 60-something-year-old Canon P black paint Canon rangefinder camera. A really wonderful thing. I was very happy to open the box and find this on the inside, and quite pleased with the camera and its condition and appearance. These are just so rare and so hard to find. The Canon 7 was made in black, and that's a rare camera, but nothing compared to the rarity of something like this. These are just almost stupidly rare. I always wondered why they didn't make more of the black paint Canon Ps. You can see it's a really beautiful camera. They made enough of the Canon 7, but Canon considered its Model 7 camera to be its top-of-the-line professional rangefinder camera. The P was actually just the little brother to the Canon 7. The Canon 7, of course, featuring its wonderful built-in selenium light meter, so it didn't need to have an accessory light meter attached to it, and also its ability to take that really monster 50mm f/0.95 lens, which, of course, the P isn't capable of operating with. But still, between the two, the P seems to be a much more interesting camera. The black paint was always considered kind of a professional kind of thing. The first Yashica Electro 35 camera, which was painted black, was not called just the Electro 35, it was called the Professional. And this was always available as kind of a limited option in some cameras. Now, nowadays, pretty much all the pro cameras are black. But back in the day, it was kind of a special thing to have a black painted camera, one which was normally manufactured in the chrome finish. So the first thing I'm going to do in this video is kind of describe the differences between the real thing, a real Canon black paint camera, Canon P or Canon 7, and one of the countless numerous copies or repainted cameras which are out there. If you look on eBay or other places, you'll see a lot of black paint Canon cameras, Ps and 7s, mostly Ps, which are painted black, and they're very beautiful. But 99.9% or maybe even more than that are not genuine. The most obvious way to tell the difference between an original black camera and one which has been repainted is the strap lugs. On a black paint camera, these are always black. On a repainted camera, they're pretty much always chrome. With the Canon P, it gets a little bit more tricky to see, to tell quickly which one is real and which one isn't real. There were two variations of the Canon P. One was a black paint camera, which the black paint was applied to raw brass. And then there was a version where the body parts were nickel plated, and then the paint was applied over the nickel plating. And this is one of those examples. So it means now I've had one of each. The nickel plating was more durable and the paint stuck to it better, so there was less wear to the paint. The paint didn't come off so easily as it did on the brass camera. I did a video about my brass Canon P camera. You can probably look back in my log of videos to see it. And if you look at that, you'll notice that maybe 40% of the paint was rubbed off of it, where this one here, the paint is mostly intact. Wonderful thing about the nickel finish is you can see how glossy it is when it reflects in the light, and that's due to the really nice finish that the nickel plating puts underneath and allows the paint to shine that much more. It's hard to tell the original ones a little bit because the chrome plated ones, which are repainted, when the paint wears in the corners, they have a kind of a silver finish, and when these nickel plated ones wear in the corners, they have the same silver finish, or almost. The difference is that nickel is not as shiny as the chrome. It kind of has a more satin appearance to it. And also the paint tends to rub off a little bit, where it comes off in flakes or chunks on the camera, which is chrome plated. So that's kind of the easy way to tell the difference. More sophisticated people have actually gone to the trouble of stripping the chrome plating off of a Canon P camera and then repainting it. And though that's a much better way to do the job, it's still not going to be an original camera. And for people who, I guess, know their stuff, they can tell the difference between one which has been stripped completely and repainted and one which wasn't. A lot of it is in the quality of the paint and the way it's applied. And like the Canon cameras, the paint was actually on the P was a quite high quality paint. When you compare it to the paint which they put on Leicas, like the old M3s and M4s, the black paint, that was actually a pretty bad quality paint which came off easily and didn't have a really good finish to it. So that if the paint is so-so, it's kind of hard to tell if it's real or not. But Canon did a much better job with the painting of their cameras, as you can tell with this one. This one has been 60-something years old, and it's been well used, but as you can see, the paint has held up very well over all that time. So the obvious points to finding it, and I guess finding the real black paint over the, repainted ones. One exception is the winding lever here. Some of these parts were interchanged between the Canon P and black paint Canon 7. So you may have one which is brass, or you may have one which is nickel plated underneath. Either one is correct. I once had a black paint Canon 7, which this was the lever was missing. And I ended up taking a chrome one and for a long time carefully sanding the chrome off of it down to the brass, then priming it and painting it. And I actually got a really good match out of the camera, and I was really pleased with the way it came out. But these are just really gorgeous. So I'm going to go ahead and take a break for a minute because my Canon G7X Mark III camera tends to shut down on me if I try to record for too long without giving it a break. So I'm going to set the camera down here for just a moment and wet my whistle, and I'll be right back. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. When I came to Japan about 15 or so years ago, the Canon P was a quite common and inexpensive camera. They're still quite common here in Japan today, but they are no longer inexpensive. When I first came here, I could usually find a Canon 7, or not Canon, a Canon P and a lens for around 8,000 yen, 9,000 yen, which is between $70 and $80. And it would more than likely it would be a good enough ready-to-use camera. Might need a little bit of work, but nowadays just the body themselves go for $200 and up. The Canon P has developed kind of its own cult following among film photography fans, and for good reason. The first reason which makes this camera so popular is its complete and utter simplicity. There is nothing on this camera that doesn't belong here. There are no unnecessary electronics, no unnecessary frills or accessories or things like that. It's like I watched a policeman putting his stuff, I guess getting his rifle out of a trunk at the airport, and he had this like M4 rifle with this crazy guard on the front with lights and lasers and an optical scope and all this kind of useless crap, which added about at least as much weight to the rifle as it had before he started. And with cameras, it can be the same thing. Some SLR cameras, you add motor drives and battery packs and this and that and the other, and they become kind of overcomplicated monstrosities with all these bells and whistles. The Canon P has nothing like that. It just has what you need to do the job. The basic things which this camera has, which are what people need, is first the lens mount. And the Canon P has what is known as the M39 or Leica L mount. And so this was the mount which Leica invented for its first 35mm cameras, and it became a standard of interchangeable lens cameras and used by many makers. So Canon made a large variety of lenses for this mount. They were also made by Minolta, Konica, Nikon, and a few other makers, not to mention Leica themselves. So there's a huge variety of lenses which you can fit to this camera. And it makes a really good foundation if you have a collection of these kind of lenses or really want to use them. The second feature is this wonderful viewfinder. This is a large and bright viewfinder, and it has an assortment of frame lines with parallax correction for 35mm through 135mm lenses. So not only can you fit a large number of lenses to this camera, you can actually have frame lines which will allow you to use them. What's more, the field of view is large enough that if you focus outside the 35mm lines, you can actually use a 28mm lens without using an accessory finder on this lens or on this camera. So it's a really wonderful foundation for an interchangeable lens camera. The next good thing about this camera, or the third strong point, is its shutter. So the shutter on this camera, as well as the Canon 7 and some other ones, is made out of metal. It's made out of stainless steel, which is very, very thin, and I guess it's anodized or coated somehow in black. And this shutter does not rot. It does not get burns from sunlight, focusing through the lens or things like that. It's kind of bulletproof. Now, it's easily dented or scratched, but it's very hard to damage it and actually cause any harm to the camera. Now, the big weakness to a lot of the old rangefinder cameras, old Leicas and things like that, are rotting shutters which allow light to leak through, or shutters which get hard and dry, and they don't roll up and roll on the shutter rollers, which makes them run really slow or not run at all. This is a really common problem with the older Minolta rangefinder cameras, not to mention a lot of SLR cameras like the Pentax SP and things like that. Those also suffer from this problem. The Canon P does not have these issues. It's an incredibly reliable camera, which when it's working, it just keeps working and working. This camera has two weaknesses, but they are not fatal weaknesses. They are common. I can't really call them weaknesses. They are just issues. They are not fatal issues like the ones which we have in certain other cameras, like the stuck mirror on the Pentax MX, or the sticky mirror on the LX, or things issues which you find with other ones. The issues on this camera, there are only two, and they are quite simple. The first issue is the shutter not closing all the way, the second shutter. So you go to take a photo and you operate the shutter. The first shutter goes all the way. The second shutter almost goes all the way and then stops almost to the end, leaving a gap for the light to get through, which exposes the film. Now, this is a very common issue, which probably happens more than 1 out of 10 of these cameras which I come across. And this solution is simple. What you have to do is take the bottom cover off here. You have to take this nut from around the tripod adapter and take out these two screws, and in the middle here there's this round cam that turns when the shutter is being fired. There are electrical contacts here for the flash synchronization. What happens is the lubricant dries up on this cam and it doesn't travel all the way to the end of its, it doesn't complete the turn. If you add a little bit of oil on the bottom, that frees it up, it travels all the way and the shutter will close all the way. The other issue is that this camera sometimes doesn't want to work at 1/1000th of a second. The shutter spring wears out a little bit on the lead shutter curtain, and that causes the shutter curtain to run a little bit slower than it should, and then you don't get a gap here in the shutter for the 1/1000th speed. If you have the bottom cover off, you can add a little bit of tension in the first roller, with the screwdriver. It's a little bit tricky to do, but you can do it at home as long as you're careful and you don't let it spin out and lose, all the tension in it. Then you got to start from scratch and tighten it all up again. And that can at least get you in the ballpark where you can use the 1/1000th speed. Of course, to do it properly, you need to have a shutter speed tester and accurately adjust it with a tester. I have a tester here at home, which I seldom use. I prefer to use an old television monitor set to a static channel. Old TVs run at what is called a 60 hertz cycle, or I guess 60 frames per second. And if you are firing a shutter while looking at a CRT screen, you can see the size of the shutter gap and the angle. And by looking at the angle and the gap, you can pretty accurately measure the shutter speed and adjust it. I really like that method for adjusting these. In the days when everyone had one of these TVs, everyone had the tool they needed to adjust the shutter. They're a little bit uncommon nowadays, but if you've got one in your attic or garage somewhere, you can use it for adjusting the shutter in your old camera, which has a focal plane shutter like this one has. Let's go ahead and take a look at next, the features and functions and how to use the Canon P camera. Of course, I've discussed this a couple of times before, but while we're here and I have the camera in my hand, I'll go ahead and get started. On the top left here, we have the film rewind knob, which folds nice and down and out of the way, and that's to make room for either the built-in, not built-in, but accessory light meter or accessory flash. This would normally be called a flash shoe. It's an accessory shoe here on the Canon P, because not only can it mount a flash gun or flash adapter, it can also mount the adapter for or the accessory light meter, which slides here and locks on top of the shutter speed dial. The flash sync socket is located here on this side. Canon and Nikon, they were really weird back in those days, and they decided to have these kind of flashes which required a Nikon or Canon adapter in order to use a flash. There's a bunch of nonsense, added complexity to the camera and forced you to buy things which you didn't need to buy on other cameras. And they continued this for a long time. Canon continued it from on their Rangefinder cameras onto the F series, and of course Nikon did on their Rangefinder and their F series as well. And it wasn't until, I guess, the 1980s that they finally got out of that stuff. But yeah, it was kind of weird. You put the flash and the flash bracket on here, but in order to rewind the film, of course, you've got to remove the bracket to rewind the film, and Nikon was the same way. Kind of silliness. Luckily, we don't deal with that anymore. Over here, we have the shutter speed adjusting dial, and we have a full range of speeds from B and 1 second to 1/1000th of a second. Over here, we have the shutter release button, which has an original Canon soft release on it. Kind of a rare accessory. Here is the shutter release button, and underneath that we have the release switch. When you are rewinding the film, just turn this dial around the shutter button all the way to the left. Then you can rewind the film. After the film is rewound and you put a new roll of film inside, turn it back to the A position and simply wind and fire the shutter until the number 1 appears in the window. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back of the camera. Here we have the dial which you use to remind you of what films you have in the camera. It works pretty easily on this camera. On other Canon P cameras, it's really hard to turn. Some of them it doesn't turn at all. This has no influence on the operation of the camera. It just serves to remind you what kind of film you have in it. That is kind of important, especially if you use more than one camera and one kind of film. You don't want to forget what kind of film you have loaded in the camera. That really makes a mess of things if you assume you have the wrong film and you make your light meter adjustments for the wrong speed film. Of course, the images don't come out right. Here we have the viewfinder window, and maybe you can kind of see the bright line frame lines in it. An issue which we sometimes see with this is that this this entire panel here is removable. And when Canon sold these cameras, they produced a line of accessory diopter lenses, and in various types. And some people who didn't want to wear glasses and shoot, they would put on an accessory diopter adapter and get rid of the original adapter here. And I remember the first time I came across this, I got one of these cameras and I was trying to adjust the viewfinder and I couldn't see through it. Everything was blurry, and I thought that there was some kind of problem with the camera. And then I took this off and I looked through it and I realized that it was a diopter lens and not actually just a clear glass. So luckily I was able to get one off of another Canon P, which I had in my toolbox, which was broken. I put it on and then I could use the camera. So if you have one of these cameras which came from Japan, there's a slight chance it might have a diopter lens in it, and if it doesn't match your eyesight, you're going to have a little bit of difficulty using one of these. You can of course take this off, pop the glass out, and you can either cut a piece of glass from an old medical slide or something like that and glue it into place. I don't recommend not running it because you don't want dust or dirt to get into the viewfinder assembly that can cause a lot of problems later on. All right. Moving to the front of the camera, we have a few things here. We have the self-timer. I always recommend on other cameras not to mess with the self-timer. On cameras like the Canon P or Canon 7 or the old SLR cameras, these are very rugged and reliable, and I trust them to operate without working. If you have an old camera where the self-timer is built into the lens, I recommend you not use that because they can go bad at any time. They could be working every day for a year and then you use it right now and it won't work. They're just completely terrible and unreliable, so don't mess with them. Here we have the rangefinder window and the viewfinder window. The rangefinder window has this bezel around it which is knurled. You can unscrew it and take it off, and that allows you to turn this lens here for your vertical adjustment. If the vertical adjustment is off in your viewfinder, you need to turn this one way or the other until it's lined up. You need a pair of sharp pointed tweezers. There are holes, like on this nut here on the bottom, there are two holes here. There are two holes, one on either side of this lens, which you use a tool to turn it one way or the other. You can push it with a screwdriver, but I don't recommend that because it's easy for the screwdriver to pop out and scratch something. When you're done, make sure to screw this back on so you don't lose it and so dirt and stuff doesn't get around the threads to the adjusting mechanism. Over here we have this screw right by where my finger is pointing. This is for the horizontal adjustment to the rangefinder. Remove this screw and right underneath you'll find a small screw which adjusts the horizontal adjustment, and quite easy to do. It only takes a couple of minutes to adjust the rangefinder on a Canon P. This particular lens here is a 35mm f2 Canon lens, and really wonderful lens. I was happy to get this one. Optically, it's a superb performer, probably the second best 35mm lens which Canon made after their wonderful 35mm f1.5, which is now up in like Summicron Series 4 price range nowadays. This is a much better lens. I don't know if it's a better performing lens. I've got an old version 4 Summicron somewhere, but this is a much better value, and the amount of image you get for the price, it's a better value than the more expensive Leica lens. This is a very high quality lens with good optics. The only weakness it has is an aluminum helicoid in the lens, which can sometimes, the lubricant dries up and it feels gritty or rough. You'll have to lubricate it to fix that issue. This has wonderful glass which isn't prone to like the haze or fogging which some of the other cameras are prone to. So I'm going to go ahead and put this guy back together here. And before my camera shuts down, I'm going to take a break for another moment, so I'll be right back. Alright, so in part 3 I'm going to move on from the camera and I'm going to look at what else is located inside the box. We have some literature in here, which is something which I don't often come across with these cameras. The first thing we have on the top here is the Canon P Japanese instruction manual. I can tell it's Japanese because I've seen 100 of these. It's written here on the back, a little bit in Japanese and a little bit in English. Cocking first set. And taking a look inside here, we have just the basic information showing the layout of the camera. Oh, I'll go ahead and hold this so you can see. It's probably upside down the way I had it before. Here we have a price list for the different lenses, and this gives you an idea of the different lenses which Canon had available for the Canon P. Starting up here from the 25mm f3.5, that's probably the most collectible and the hardest to find lens, though not the most expensive. It came with an accessory finder and a little case and all that. Then we have the 135 f3.5. That's a kind of inexpensive lens. I can usually find these for like $20 or $30 here in Japan. All these lenses are really wonderful lenses. The ones which you have to be careful of are the 50mm 2.8, the 1.8, and the 1.2. These three lenses are very susceptible to permanent haze in the rear element. What happens is that lubricant from inside the lens itself gases out and settles on the rear element inside the lens, and it eats into the coating and then eats into the glass and etches it and causes a permanent haze. If you have one of these lenses, you really have to take it apart and clean it from time to time. Fortunately, it's very simple to clean these lenses. You only need one tool, and I'll kind of describe how to do it with this 35mm lens, even though this one is a little bit different. On the back of these cameras, there's a metal ring here, and on either side there's a slot for a tool. You turn this out and you screw this nut out, and the lens will come apart into two pieces. And when it's apart in two pieces, the front piece, you can remove the rear lens element by simply twisting it off with your hand. And when you twist it off, that will allow you to access the inside of the rear element. And from time to time, you should clean that and make sure that there's no lubricant haze building up on it. And then simply screw the lens back on. Put the two halves together. There's a fork and a pin which have to go together so the aperture works. And once that's right, just thread the ring back into place, and then the camera should be good for a year or two before you have to start worrying about the haze building up again. If the camera has haze, sometimes you can polish it off enough to where you can still get images from the lens, but it's really hard to get it all the way clean. I'm trying to look for a really clean 50mm f1.2 lens, but maybe 1 in 10, which I see nowadays is only, it has no haze. The other 9 have varying amounts of haze, so it's kind of annoying. The most desirable of these lenses is the 35mm f1.5. It wasn't that long ago here in Japan where I could actually get one for around this 35,000 yen price, and now they're going upwards of $1,000, sometimes $2,000, and for box examples even higher than that. That is an important point when it comes to these cameras like this old Canon P, or ones which are kind of hard to find. They might seem like really expensive when you look at the price tag, but on the other hand, compared to a lot of other things, you can really consider these an investment. So way back in 2008, I bought a brand new Nikon D700, and it was around 250,000 yen. And nowadays, I'd be lucky if I could get 35,000 yen for it. Where this camera back in 2008, I probably could have got for say 50 or 60,000 yen, and it's worth about 5 times that much nowadays. So it's you can't really go wrong with one of these things. And in film photography in general, with these old mechanical cameras, they're not most of them are not especially expensive, and for the most part, if you decide to sell them, you can get at least what you paid for them originally. Next piece of literature we have here, it looks like a quick guide written in German for the Canon P, and let's see, it talks about the variety of lenses and the parallax stuff, and what else? The other accessories and things. My German is quite bad, or non-existent, but anyway, it's vaguely resembles English enough that you can kind of get an idea of what it's saying. You German people out there can have a good laugh at this. But yeah, this is kind of a rare accessory. There aren't many of old Canon accessories from the 50s and 60s which were available in German. And then here we have a American or English guide to the Canon P. And here we have a wonderful picture of Canon's brand new factory that they built back in the 1950s, which was in Otaku in Tokyo. Nowadays, this is surrounded, the factory isn't here anymore. It's kind of been demolished and replaced with other buildings. But yeah, kind of a nice guide here, very easy to use. The kind of funny thing that in these old cameras where you had to do everything yourself, there was no computer or anything to operate anything, that you had to completely make all the adjustments manually. The instructions are actually much smaller than these modern cameras, which supposedly do everything for you. Like when I compare, say a manual to my D700, it's kind of like a small novel. When you see how many pages there are compared to something like this, which you can fit inside this small box. But anyway, I've been making this video for a long time, and I've got to get all this stuff done and try to get this video edited and uploaded before I run off to the bus stop. I hope you've enjoyed the video and that it hasn't taken up too much of your time. And if you like the video, please like it. That gets more people interested and helps me to keep making these videos. And subscribing, of course, always helps. I hope to be making more videos about interesting cameras. I've got a couple of more, maybe not quite as interesting as this one, but interesting in their own way, on their way here. And hopefully I'll be making videos about them next week. I'm kind of back to normal here. Kind of recovered from coronavirus, recovered from my recent bicycle accident, which left me with a couple of cracked ribs. And now that it's September, hopefully life will get back to normal and I can get back to making more videos. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.